morning, everyone. So for those who don't know me, I'm Victor Charpiat. I'm a head of legal at Spico, a French startup that tokenizes regulated investment funds in France and in the EU. So last year I was here as a lawyer. This year I'm here as a legal counsel. But this talk this year will be probably a bit less complex from a legal perspective and a bit more focused on a long-term vision that we have at Spico to build a payment method which is better than actual money. Of course, it's a very long-term vision, it's a bit of a dream, but I wanted to share that with you and collect feedbacks if you have some. And if you work in that industry yourselves of either tokenized financial products or, of course, stablecoins, I would be very happy to discuss these, all this content with you. So the first question is, why is money still non-yield-bearing in 2025 with 15 years of blockchain and more than probably 30 years of financial innovation? We have extremely sophisticated financial products now. We will have, in a few months, hopefully, stock tokens in our Robinhood wallet. We will be able to own these stock tokens in a self-custodial wallet and hopefully transfer them between addresses. At least they have not promised that we will be able to do that, but I think that they would like for that to happen. So if we could have all these yield-bearing assets in our wallets, why couldn't we use them to make payments? To make payments to friends, to make payments to corporations or payment between companies, to make gifts and donations. It would be extremely convenient if we have all these assets in a wallet and they are transferable and we can transfer them to settle transactions. So of course, listed securities are obvious because they are highly liquid. So you could have like tokenized shares of NVIDIA in your wallet and use that to make a donation or a payment. Probably, so this is ranked from most risky to least risky or least volatile. So of course, ETFs are quite obvious too. Like if you could have a tokenized share of an ETF, which is less volatile than actual direct stocks, it could be very interesting. Plus, of course, it's yield-bearing. And then T-bills. T-bills, of course, is the focus of, I think, everybody in the space because they are yield-bearing. They represent, first, the most secure financial asset in existence because they are short-term debt issued by governments, like the US governments, European governments. And when I mean short-term, of course, there are a lot of T-bills. There are a lot of types of sovereign debt, but T-bills in general refer to very short-term debt, in general between 1 month and let's say 6 to 9 months. And the last category, the money market funds, are actually regulated investment funds. They're regulated in the EU, they're also regulated in a slightly different way in the US and or in other countries. And these funds are allowed to own only exclusively T-bills with a maturity that is precisely determined by the prospectus and the legal documentation of the fund. So when you own a money market fund, whether it's tokenized or not, you know that the assets of these funds are exclusively comprised of short-term debt. So the volatility is minimal and the risk of loss is almost inexistent. So it would be great, that's our vision at least, if we could use shares of tokenized money market funds to settle payments. So why do we want it? First because the years of zero interest rates are behind us, and in the future we will probably have many years of positive interest rates between 2% and 4% in Europe or in the US. And then the problem we have is that, of course, you can have yield-bearing assets in your portfolio. You could own an MMF and then convert it to fiat and then withdraw the fiat and send the fiat as payment. But in that case, overall, in that transaction, the payer and the payee, so the one that pays and the one that receives, will lose around 2 or 3 days of yield each time they do this operation. And in practice, probably much more than 2 or 3 days, because there will be frictions and settlement times with the banks or financial providers of both entities. And lastly, because we can do it right now with technology under regulation, so if we can do it, we should do it. So now, of course, we focus on tokenized money market funds. It's our focus at Spyco. So we want to compare them to traditional money. Of course, when we compare anything to traditional money, we go back to the principles of Aristotle. It's always the 3 functions of money: the medium of exchange, the unit of value, and the store of value. The unit of account or measure of value and the store of value. So first, for medium of exchange, the reality is that tokenized MMFs are probably less interesting than traditional money because they are not freely transferable outside of whitelisted users. So right now, for KYC reasons that I will cover in a few minutes, tokenized MMFs and other tokenized financial instruments can only be transferred between whitelisted users. So they are a bit inferior, but as a measure of value, I think that MMFs can be as efficient and as useful as traditional money, and in particular because there are types of MMFs which are rather used, not that much in Europe, but a lot in the US, where the net asset value is constant. So the shares of the tokenized MMF or the MMF are always worth $1 or €1, and then it's the number of shares that you own which increases. It's a bit like the tokens on Aave or certain stablecoins. So this is extremely efficient, and it could completely replace money because the unit is the same. And then as a store of value, I think that MMFs are clearly better than traditional money, notably because they're yield-bearing and they represent extremely secure financial assets. So now we will cover a bit of issues. There are 4 main issues that could make tokenized MMF a complex tool to be used as a payment method, but for each of them there are solutions. Or for some of them, there might not be solutions right now, but they could be solutions in the future. We'll see that. The first one, of course, is accounting. Accounting is always done in currency, in local currency of the company that applies the accounting rules, so euro or dollars, depending on where you are. Of course, you cannot have an accounting that accounts everything, all your transactions and all your assets using the MMF as the unit of value. So in any case, when there is a transaction that uses tokenized money market fund, what you have to do is first make a conversion, so calculate how much you need to pay to the seller of the goods in the tokenized MMF in order to settle a transaction. So you need to divide the value of a transaction by the net asset value of the shares. And then, from the perspective of the buyer of the goods, so the one that makes the payment, it's treated as a sale. So, from an accounting perspective, the payer has sold its assets, in that case, some shares of the MMF, and has converted them to fiat and has used fiat to make the payment. So, there is a sale. And that sale causes capital gains, of course, because MMF basically never decrease in value, so they always increase in value. So each operation that you make with MMF, you will, in theory, account a taxable capital gain. But is that a real problem? I don't think so. First, because we can have automated accounting that reconcile all these transactions, and secondly, because there is a tax impact, but the tax impact is always the same. And if you keep the MMF as an investment tool to manage cash or manage a company's treasury, you will always pay taxes eventually on the sale. So whether you pay them when you make the transaction or you pay them just once per year when you make a batch sale, absolutely the same. You don't pay more taxes because you use tokenized MMF as a payment method. Then, of course, the legal issues, if there are some. So the most core issue is that only money is legal tender in every country. So, of course, in France, it's the euro. In the US, it's the US dollar. But legal tender does not mean that you cannot use any other payment method than the legal tender to settle a transaction. It only means that you cannot refuse a payment made in legal tender. So if somebody wants to pay you in euro in France, you cannot refuse that payment, it's illegal. And then you are forced to use euro to pay taxes and to pay your judicial payments like fines or settlements. But otherwise, it's on a bilateral contractual basis, it's absolutely legal to use anything else as a payment method. And in that case, lawyers talk about payment in kind. So basically, you exchange a good for another good, and you have some kind of method to account for the value of both, and then the transaction is settled. And this is a payment method that actually works. But the problem we have, the legal problem that we have, of course, is that tokenized MMFs are financial instruments. Financial instruments, at least in France and in the European Union and all major jurisdictions, are all subject to KYC. So the issuer always have to KYC every investor, and there is no way for an investor to own a tokenized financial asset without being identified by the issuer. This would create a situation of what we called in the past bearer assets. And right now, stablecoins are known to be extremely efficient bearer assets because you can own stablecoins without having to be KYC'd by the issuer at the time that you own the stablecoin. You have to be KYC'd when you want to withdraw or subscribe, but you can hold them without being KYC'd. And that makes them extremely efficient. Let's see how long I have. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to speak a bit faster now. So the third issue is that banks are efficient, extremely efficient, at least in the European Union and probably in most major jurisdictions. Most payments some payments are instant, like within the same bank. When you have two clients with the same bank, they can make instant payment between themselves. Of course, in the EU, we have now our SEPA instant up to 100,000 euros. So you can make instant payments up to that amount between European accounts. And for other payments, in general, it takes between 1 and 2 days. And it's only for some kind of international payments that you could have very long settlement times. And of course, the last issue is not a very legal one. It's the issue of sovereignty, because money is sovereign. Money is a major sovereign issue, and for any jurisdiction or government, mastering the money as a sovereign tool is essential. So we have seen this in the European Union with stablecoins, which were a threat, considered as a threat by the European Central Bank for many years, and they still consider it as an inferior method of payment compared to fiat. And of course, they want to push the digital euro. And what's interesting here is that 4 years ago, before MiCA was adopted, the European Central Bank created a regulatory framework based on nothing but one very specific legal rule that allows it to create a supervisory framework. And that framework included all payment methods, including stablecoins, even before stablecoins were regulated. So the last question is, of course, does blockchain solve this? Clearly, not perfectly in that case. The settlement with tokenized MMF is arguably faster, or at least as fast as with traditional money. And for the other aspects, in most cases, I would say that they are equal as payment methods. As a unit of account, as a way to facilitate accounting, they are somewhat equal. But of course, with tokenized MMF, you will always have tax friction, which you don't have with traditional money. Of course, unless you use foreign currency, because foreign currency is subject to tax friction. And of course, I think the most important one is KYC. Until we solve KYC, until we have a way to have financial assets that are bearer assets, like we used to have that in the past, and I'm not sure that we will have that in the future because of the anti-money laundering rules. Money will always be a bit easier to use as a payment method. So the alternative in the short term is to what we have been doing with Pico, is to have a system where when you want to make a payment with MMF, in fact, you will not make the payment with MMF, you will make the payment with stablecoins. And we have a setup with a regulated DASP in France that will convert the stablecoins to the MMF. So you can get in and out of the MMF with stablecoins, which is quite efficient. And in the near future, we will have a direct way to subscribe and redeem from the investment fund directly with stablecoins. So in that case, you could have a system where you pay with stablecoins, and the stablecoin that you use were redeemed from the fund directly in stablecoins, and then the one that receives the payment will be able to invest in the investment fund with stablecoins without having to convert back to fiat, which is quite efficient. So now a few words about Pico, and I will take then a few questions. We have been live for about 1 year, and what we have done so far is to create a UCITS compliant regulated MMF, both in euro and dollars. So UCITS is the legal framework for regulated investment fund in the European Union. It's issued on public blockchains. And you can have tokenized shares of this MMF in your wallet, including in your self-custodial wallet. You can transfer them between whitelisted addresses. Of course, as I said before, only KYC addresses and only whitelisted addresses. It cannot be transferred to third parties that we cannot identify. And we have a way, as I said, to deposit and withdraw in stablecoins, although now it still requires an intermediary. And in a few weeks, we will have a feature to withdraw instantly at any time of the day up to 100,000, which is, I think, very interesting because it allows you to optimize the time that your money can stay within the fund and earn yield. And it stops earning yield at the very last moment, and you make the payment, so you optimize the yield that you get. So yeah, those are a few metrics about our platform, around 330 million of cash, not actually managed by us, but managed by a third party, which is a regulated asset manager. And we have facilitated more than 700 million in deposits and withdrawals, which shows that it's extremely efficient as a cash management tool. So thanks a lot for being here today. And if you have any questions about either tokenized MMF, as the payment method, or Pico in general, I will be happy to take them in the 3 minutes that we still have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victor. We will take 2 questions. Okay.
So I just want to ask about the tax friction that would go on. Could you not account for that with like some form of on-chain accounting where, for example, you might have configured with the smart contract that holds these tokenized MNFs of like, hey, here's what I should reserve for taxes, and I'm using either FILO, FIFO, or whatever general accounting standards for when I owe my tax basis. Could that not significantly resolve a lot of the tax friction issues associated with tokenized MMFs?
It could help. Maybe a little issue is that first you have to pay taxes in fiat, so eventually you will have to get out of the on-chain environment to pay taxes with fiat. And also the other issue is that the exact amount that you have to pay in taxes when you sell an MMF depends on your entry price. Mm-hmm. And it's different for each investor, and it might not be a data which is on the blockchain. It might be a data which is exclusively off-chain, and your accountant knows, but maybe the blockchain doesn't know. Mm-hmm. So Yeah, that's a feature, but clearly not one that we would build in the short term.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
One last question.
Thanks for the presentation. It was really nice. So the Genius Act forbids like stablecoins to pass yield to retail, right? Do you think that if that somehow is gonna go away eventually, this will compete with the solution that you're doing?
If there is a way for stablecoin issuers to pass yield to customers, I think it would clearly be a superior form of payment compared to what I've described here. But in the European Union, as you may know, it's forbidden for like traditional reasons more than actual very important economic reasons. And in the US, it seems that it will be the same. I don't really know why, what's the exact rationale for forbidding yield for stablecoin holdings. I think there is a question of competition with the traditional banks and the fact that paying yield on the deposits, bank or like quasi-banking deposits, is supposed to be part of the wider banking monopoly. So it cannot be competed by non-banks. So we have seen in Europe a lot of solutions, alternative solutions, mostly around like routing stablecoins to DeFi protocols to earn yield on the protocols like Aave or Morpho, and then paying the yield to the end customer through the intermediary. But I think that they're first more risky than just paying yield based on the reserve of the stablecoin. And then they're like hacks, like legal hacks on product hacks, but maybe not something that is sustainable in the long term, but we will see.
All right, thanks.
Right. Thank you very much, Victor.